the author of the Tanya, the Balatanya, told us that he's going to teach us in this book called Tanya, how is it so relevant? How is it that no matter what background you have, no matter where you are holding in the state of spirituality, it's relevant to everyone? How is that? And the Alter Rebbe said, the Balatanya, the author said, he's going to teach it to us in a long and short way. And I explained a long and short way basically means that there are two ways to do something. One is short and long. Short and long means, yeah, it's easy, quick fix, no effort. But when you finally reach your destination, you see that you really didn't reach your destination. You didn't really get there yet, and you still have a long way to go. Not only that, you might even have had a setback. But the Balatanya says, I'm not going to do it in a short and long way, because in Yiddishkeit and Judaism, there is no quick fix. Everything takes time, step by step, as we say, yidel by yidel. And what does that mean? That means we're going to have to work hard, and we're going to contemplate a little bit, and it's a little hard work, and it's a little self-sacrifice, being a little more selfless. But at the end, we will not only reach our destination, and what is our destination? It'll be internalized. It'll literally be part of us. It will not just be lip service. It will not just be actions. We won't just walk the walk and talk the talk. It'll literally be a part of our lives where we will not be able to live without it. Today we're going to start Perek Aleph, the first chapter. Before we start the first chapter, I'd like to ask a few questions. And the questions are the topics that these 53 chapters speak about. And the question is, and I think it's a question that not too many of us ask, and that is, who are we? Who am I? Rabbi, I don't understand. What do you mean, who are you? Are you schizophrenic? You have a double personality? What do you mean, who are you? What do I identify myself with? What do we identify? Is it money? Is it fame? Is it our jobs? Do we ever really look in the mirror at ourselves and say, self, who am I? What happens if I take away the fame, and I take away the money, and I take away the clothes, and I take away the cars that I identify myself with? What do I remain? Who am I? Who am I? What am I? So that, I think, is a question that should be contemplated on by everyone, and the Tanya addresses that. The next question that I think we have to ask ourselves is, not only who am I, we all run after something that we need desperately. And the thing we need desperately is called simcha, joy and happiness. We run after that. We're searching for that, right? We're looking all over for that. But do we have real happiness? Do we own that happiness? Is that happiness real with us? So, what's a test to find out if happiness is real or not? Very simple. What is truth? What exactly is truth? Truth is something that's everlasting. Truth is something that is here now, and no matter what the situation in life is, it always remains. It's everlasting. One of the things we know is true is something called Torah. How long is it lasting?
Everlasting.
Everlasting, as Eric just said. Over 3,000 years, that's pretty long.
And before that?
And before that, Eric says, excellent. So we know the Torah is true, the Torah is real, the Torah is emes. Let's take our styles, our fads. Today the style is to go dress this way. So we dress this way. What happens in 3 months from now when the style changes? What happens to the style of 3 months ago? Fades away. It's gone. You know why? It's not emes. It's not truth. It's not real. What happens, I know this is going to be hard to grasp and hard to understand and hard to wrap our minds around this, but what happens when we have X amount of zeros in the bank? And by the way, not only zeros, some numbers before the zeros also, okay? We don't want to just have zeros in the bank. There are numbers before the zeros. That is great. What could be a greater happiness? What happens if, God forbid, those zeros are lost? Where's the happiness? Well, most people would be depressed, right? So that means, believe it or not, money cannot buy you true happiness. And that goes for every other thing that is materialistic. It's here today, gone tomorrow. It's not real. It's not true. It can't bring you true happiness. It can bring you temporary joy. But when that joy is gone, it's gone. The happiness is gone. Later on in the chapters, the Tanya will speak about what is true happiness. We call that simcha sachayim. Simcha, joy of real joy of life. What is it? And how do we attain it? True simcha, true joy. We're always looking and we worry and we lose sleep over it. Always trying to tackle something else. But sometimes it's right in front of us, and it might even be right inside of us, right in front of our nose, and we don't even know about it. Because we're always looking in someone else's yard. We're always looking at not what we have, not what we own, not at our lives. We're always looking at what we don't have. We always think about, if I could only have a little more. How about what I do have? So Tanya is going to also tell us how to achieve that true happiness. The next question is, crazy question, but think about it for a minute. I was born in this generation to a certain set of parents, to certain siblings, in a certain setting, and it was dealt a certain set of cards, a certain life. Why am I here? Why was I born? My friends, we don't ask, or at least I never met anyone that was asked, would you like to be born? I never met anyone like that yet, or at least no one ever told me. They held it as a good secret. Now that we are born, we don't want to leave this world. Why were we born? And why were we born now? Why were we born at such a time and such a period with such parents and so on and so forth? Or was that random? Rabbi, you got to go to these parents, and Eric, you got to go here, and Moshe, and you got to go there, and Rachel, you got to go there. That's random? Or do we serve a purpose? The fact that we are here now, that we are born in this world, not in a different generation, not in a different time period, not to a different set of parents. What is life and all about? And if life has meaning, what is a meaningful life? How do we attain a meaningful life? And a meaningful life means we have to accomplish. We have a job and we have to accomplish it. What is our mission in life? We're down there for 70, 80, 90 years, and if we're lucky, 95 years. Some people I know 100 years. We must be here for a purpose. A purpose means to accomplish a mission. What are we doing down here? And what is our mission? And how can we accomplish it? How do we know what our mission is? Those three questions are covered in the 53 chapters of Tanya. 1, who am I? Will the real me please stand up? Number 1. Number 2, happiness. We're all running after happiness, chasing after it. What is true happiness and how can we attain it? Where it'll be real and stay with us. And 3, we're born here and now. What's our mission? What's our job? What do we have to accomplish? And how do we know what we have to accomplish? By the way, how do we know when we accomplished our job? So before we start the first chapter, I'd like to tell you a short little story. There was a great sage, a Hasidic Jew by the name of Reb Zusha of Anapol. He was one of the students of the Mizritcher Maggid. In other words, the Baal Shem Tov was the first generation of the Hasidic movement. There was the Mizritcher Maggid. He had many students after him. One of them was Reb Zusha. Reb Zusha was on his deathbed. And Reb Zusha was a great tzaddik. And he was crying. And his students came to him and said, Rebbe, what are you crying about? You lived a life which was completely righteous. You lived a holy, a pure life. You're going straight to paradise, Gan Eden. Straight. No stops. No pit stops. No rest stops. You're going straight up there. What are you worried about? He looks at his students and he said, I'm not worried that they're going to say, Zusha, why weren't you like our patriarch Abraham? You know what I'm going to tell them? Because I wasn't our patriarch Abraham. I'm not worried that they're going to say, Zusha, why weren't you like King David, as great as King David? You know what I'm going to tell them if they say that? If they say, why wasn't I like King David? I'll tell them I wasn't King David. What I'm worried about they're going to say is, Zusha, why weren't you like Zusha? Why didn't you do a little more? Why didn't you live up to your potential? My friends, this book is called Tanya. I'm going to give you for many reasons, but I'm going to give you 2 reasons. One reason it's called Tanya is because it's the first word of the book, Tanya. That the author of the Tanya brings down a piece of Gemara from the Talmud, and the first word is Tanya. We learned in Hebraisa, our rabbis taught. Okay. Another reason is because in the word Tanya, which are 4 letters, you switch around the letters and you have the word Eitan. Eitan means strength. What do we mean by that? And this is what the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us in the book of Tanya. Whoever learns Tanya, we go through so many challenges. A person in life doesn't only have one challenge. We have so many challenges, so many trials and tribulations. But the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, is telling us, in my book, I am going to tell you how you have a hidden strength. You have, everyone has a hidden strength to combat and to overcome your challenges. We have that hidden strength. Think about it, my friends. The Talmud tells us that God doesn't come to us and play tricks. In other words, every one of us have trials and tribulations, but our lives, our trials, our tribulations are custom made. God gave us all custom made lives. And God gave you trials and tribulations that only you could accomplish and overcome. And He didn't give them to anyone else because they could not overcome it. And God gave me trials and tribulations because only I could overcome that and no one else could. Comes the author of the Tanya and says, we all have challenges, financial challenges, emotional challenges, depression, lightheadedness, not worrying, not caring about anything in the world. Everything is covered in these 53 chapters. Every challenge that we could have in our lifetime is covered in this book, and the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us how every one of us has a hidden talent that we can overcome the craziest challenges. In the beginning of this class, I reviewed what we learned last week. That was that the Tanya is based on a verse of Ki karev elecha hadavar ma'od. It's close to you. Moshe Rabbeinu was saying this verse to so many thousands of Jews, but he didn't say Ki karev aleichem, to you in plural. He said Ki karev elecha. It's close to you individually, which means this Tanya that we're going to be learning speaks to every single one of us individually. So when we're learning this, picture the Balatanya, the author of the Tanya, Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, speaking to us as individuals. We're learning this as a group, but it is relevant to each one of us depending on what our own challenges are. And it's here to tackle our challenges. So I will start reading and we'll learn the beginning. Tanya, the first chapter. Tanya, our rabbis taught, B'Seif Perek Gimel de Nida. The Talmud tractate Nida, at the end of the third chapter. Mashbim oisai titzadik v'al tehi rasha. Before a child comes down to this world, its neshama is made to swear, it takes an oath that it will be a tzaddik, a righteous person, a good person, v'al tehi rasha, and it swears it will not be a bad person, not a rasha. That's one part of the oath. Again, mashbim aisai, before a baby is born, the neshama of the baby is made to swear titzadik va'al ti rasha, to be a tzaddik, a righteous person, to do good, Va'alti Rasha, and do not be a Rasha, do not do bad. Va'afilu kol ha'olam. And even the second part of the oath is, remember one thing, they tell us. And even if the whole world, kol ha'olam kulai, the entire world, Aimril lecha, they will tell you, tzadik ato, hey, you're a righteous person, you're a tzaddik. We hear that all the time. You're great, you're good, you're fabulous, you're a tzaddik. Again, va'afilu kol ha'olam kulei aimrim lecha tzadikata, even if the entire world will tell you, everyone around you will tell you, tzadik ata, you are righteous, you are great. Heye beinecha karasha, in your own eyes, you're not a tzaddik. In your own eyes, you should be a rasha. Rasha literally here means a bad person, an evil person. So, on one hand, they're making you swear what? Be a tzaddik, be great, don't do bad. But if everyone's going to tell you what? You're great and you're a tzaddik, in your own eyes, be a rasha, be a bad person.
Don't believe the hype.
So, first of all, this doesn't make sense because that's a bit of a contradiction itself. But let's go a little further. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, the author of the Tanya, V'tzarech lahav, and we must understand this. We must understand something. This doesn't make sense. This oath that they make us take, that we're going to be a tzaddik and not a rasha, but in our own eyes we should be a rasha, that doesn't make sense. V'tzarech lahav, and we have to understand the hot non avis perik beis in Pirkei Avot, Pirkei Avos, ethics of our fathers. In the second chapter, it says a very interesting thing, very explicit too. V'al tehi rasha b'fnei atzmecha. Do not be wicked in your own eyes. Don't look down at yourself. Don't beat yourself up. Number one. So we have a huge contradiction here. From the Mishnah and ethics of our fathers to the Gemara that says, wait a minute, in your own eyes, be wicked. We have a big contradiction there. The Gam im yiyeh be'einav kirasha, wait a minute. This oath that we have to take to be a rasha in our own eyes, there's another reason it doesn't make sense. Because if we're going to look down at ourselves and we're going to consider ourselves bad, Yeda lavavai, our hearts will be weak, v'yiyah otzav, and we will be depressed. V'lo yuchal laved Hashem b'simcha v'tuv leva, when we will not be able to serve God with joy, with simcha, and with a good heart. We all know one of the basics of Judaism, one of the basic principles of Judaism is to serve God, but not only serve God, but serve God with simcha. Serve God with joy. Be happy. And not only that, we'll leave this for a different conversation, but the Torah itself says a whole list of bad things that will happen to the Jews if they don't keep the Torah. And then the Torah also says, you know why this is going to come upon the Jews? Not because they didn't keep Shabbos, not because they didn't put on tefillin. Tachas asher lo yavadetos Hashem b'simcha, because you didn't serve God with joy. Joy is a basic simcha, which we spoke about in today's intro. Simcha, true joy, is a basic principle in our service to God, in our davening, in our learning, in our doing mitzvot. We have to do it with joy. That's a basic principle. Well, to get to that level, to do things with joy, we have to understand a little better what we're doing. And that's why we have our teachers and our rabbis and so on and so forth to teach us why we're doing what we're doing. But an interesting concept is, if we're going to be, like the oath says in the Gemara, to be wicked in our own eyes, we're going to get depressed. Emotionally, it's not healthy. We're going to have a lousy self-esteem. And that's not good. So now, the Alter Rebbe says, the Baal Tanya, now it definitely doesn't make sense. And then the Alter Rebbe says, the Baal Tanya says one step further. V'gam, v'im la yeda levavai, klal mizeh, let's say it won't bother him. He'll look at himself as a wicked person, and it's not going to bother him. And he's not going to care. It won't affect him. Wait a minute, that's even worse. If it's not going to bother him, he can come to do the worst things. So the fact that they make us swear before we come down that we're going to be a tzaddik and not a rasha, but in our own eyes we'll be a rasha, that doesn't make sense at all. Why? Number one, problem is in ethics of our fathers, it says in our own eyes we should not be a wicked person, not be bad. Number two, if we're bad in our own eyes and we have a low self-esteem and we look down upon ourselves, what happens? We will not be able to serve God with proper joy, which is a basic principle in our Judaism. And number three, if it doesn't bother us and we don't get depressed, that's even worse. Because then it'll bring us to do even worse things than just sinning. So what is the meaning of this oath? And it just doesn't make sense. The Tanya is going to bring up a new subject. In order to understand this whole thing, the Alter Rebbe, the Baal Tanya, is going to say, we have to understand people's personalities. What? Psychology? Yes, psychology. So the Tanya says as follows. Ki hine matzinu b'gemara heichalukes. We find in the Talmud and Tractate Brachos, we find 5 categories of people. 5 categories of people. Tzaddik v'tovloi, a righteous person, and he lives a good life. A righteous person, and he lives a pretty good life. Tzaddik v'raloi, a tzaddik, and he still has misfortunes in his life. He doesn't live such a good life, and he's a good guy. He's a tzaddik, he's a righteous person. Rasha v'tevloi, a rasha, a bad person, and he lives a pretty good life. We know a lot of people like that. And rasha v'raloi, an evil person, a bad person, and he doesn't have a good life. Ubeinani, and an in-between person, an intermediate person. The Gemara over there, I'm not going to get into the conversation that the Gemara is having over there, the Talmud is having. I'll just tell you what the conversation is all about and why it brings this Gemara down. There is a famous question that everyone has been asking for years, hundreds of years. But this conversation, this argument and questions have been presented in the Talmud, and this is thousands of years ago. And the question is, why are there good people that suffer? We all have had this question in some shape or form. We all have had this question. Why are there good people that suffer and bad people that have it great on this world? They have it great. And the Gemara over there speaks about it. So I'm not going to get into what the Gemara speaks about and the answers and the whole conversation, because then we're getting out of Tanya. But that's this Talmud, this Gemara. Again, there are 5 categories of people. Tzaddik v'tevlai, a tzaddik, a good person, a righteous person, and he has it good for him in this world. Tzaddik v'ralai, a righteous person, and he has it bad for himself in this world. Rough life. Rasha v'tevlai, a rasha who has a very good life. An evil person, a bad person, but he has a pretty good life. Rasha v'ralai, a rasha who has a pretty bad life. Ubeinani, and a middle person. A middle person. Not good, not bad. Well, basically, we're going to explain Ubeinani. He is going to be our main star of this entire book called the Tanya. If you remember, last week we learned that this, one of the names of the book is also Sefer Shel Beinanim, a book of in-betweeners. Not a book of righteous people. It's a book of intermediate, in-between people. We will discuss in the future what that's exactly talking about. Upirshu b'Gemara, and in the Gemara it explains tzaddik v'tovlai. Why is there such a thing called a tzaddik, and he's living a good life? Tzaddik Gomor, because he is completely righteous. Tzaddik v'ralai. Why is there a righteous person and he doesn't live such a good life? He's tzaddik she'ena gomor. He is a tzaddik that what? He's a tzaddik that isn't a complete tzaddik. He's not completely righteous. So he doesn't have it great on this world. Now, before we conclude, I want to tell you these 3 titles. Tzaddik, righteous person, Rasha, a bad person, and a Beinani, the in-between person. We're going to learn, meanwhile, the simple explanation what it means to be righteous, wicked, and in between. But what the Alter Rebbe is going to do is, the Baal Tanya is going to take all these definitions and turn them over completely. And we're going to be shocked in the later chapters what exactly is a tzaddik, a righteous person, Rasha, a wicked person, and a Beinani in between. If you look through the entire Talmud, all the volumes, and you look through all the books of the halachic laws, the Code of Jewish Law, Maimonides, we have this word tzaddik, rasha, beinani all over, at least hundreds of times. And according to the Rambam, I believe it's in the Laws of Tshuva, the 4th chapter, I believe. The Rambam says, Maimonides, the Rambam is Maimonides. He says a righteous person is someone who goes to court, and he comes out innocent. He won the court case. He is innocent. He's righteous. Same thing, the guy who lost is evil. In halacha, it goes as follows. It comes Rosh Hashanah now. We get judged on the previous year. I'm giving you an example, and Maimonides brings us down. We're at the court of law. Do you think the court is going to judge us on every single one of our actions? Because if the heavenly court is going to judge us on every action that we ever did, we just lost this court case real bad. But what does the court look at? If you have, says Maimonides, a majority of mitzvot, good deeds, which means more than 50% good deeds, which could mean even just 51%, that means you came out a tzaddik, righteous, in this court case. You came out righteous. But you still have 49% sins. But the fact that you have a majority of mitzvos, of good deeds, zechuyot, merits, 51%, what does that mean?
You're righteous.
You're righteous. You won the case. What happens if you have a majority of sins? You're called a rasha, a bad person. What does a majority mean? Not 50, but
51.
51. But you could have 49% mitzvot, merits, good deeds, but the fact that you're majority, 51%, bad deeds, you came out of the case, the court case, as a rasha. So this all has to do with our legal terms and court cases, how we use it. But the Alter Rebbe, the Tanya, as we're going to see in the next few classes, learns is completely different. And not only that, it's not that he's going to come up and say his own opinion. Well, I think a tzaddik means X, Y, Z. No. The first thing we did today was we brought down ethics of our fathers, the Mishnah, the Talmud. Next week in Mirz Hashem, we're going to bring down, the Baal Tanya is going to speak about the meaning of tzaddik and rasha, righteous and evil, according to the Zohar. The Zohar, which was written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is the foundation of Kabbalah, mysticism. It's the esoteric teachings of the Torah. And the Alter Rebbe next week is going to show us what the Zohar says about this and other commentaries as well. If you have any comments or questions, you can email me at rabbiyimargate@gmail.com, or you can call me direct at 609-418-0357. Our Evenings of Exploring the Tanya is a project of Young Israel of Margate. I wish everyone a good night and stay safe, and may the good news be yours. Have a good night, everyone. Sei gesund, and thank you for joining.